Terrible Tuesday. I'm Lisa. I'm an interpreter here at Historic Bratonsville. And today we're going to talk about how our ancestors celebrated Independence Day. Right from the start, many of the Founding Fathers realized that the signing of the Declaration of Independence was a momentous occasion to be commemorated for generations to come. They just didn't all agree on what that commemoration should look like. Some believed it should be a solemn occasion, full of sober reflection on the sacrifices made to secure our freedoms. Others believed that there should be bonfires, parades, and parties to celebrate the day. John Adams wrote to his wife that it would be celebrated with both, stating, "It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore." In fact, Adams was referring to the date of the vote to approve the Declaration, July 2nd, rather than the date that it was signed. He was right about how they would observe it, even if he was off by 2 days. The following year, Congress took the day off, and Philadelphia celebrated with church bells, bonfires, and fireworks, even as the War for Independence continued. It could be argued that July 4th, 1777 was the first federally recognized holiday, although Congress didn't actually make it official until 1870. Over the coming decades, the practice of celebrating Independence Day continued to spread across the nation. While few records exist on how it was celebrated here in York County, an early editorial in the Yorkville Inquirer makes it clear that the day had been observed, but not always in the way the editor would have wished. In the issue dated July 7th, 1857, we are told that the day passed without, according to him, any boisterous manifestation of rejoicing. The editor is not sure why this is, but feels that it isn't necessarily bad. He writes, "It is certainly a matter of congratulation that the 4th as a day for lawlessness and drunken revelry has passed away. Let us cherish the hope that it will never return in its old garb of tumultuous disorder and confusion." On July 12th, 1860, the Yorkville Inquirer gives us a wonderfully detailed report on the Independence Day celebrations at Clay Hill, which is northeast of Yorkville. The cadets from the Kings Mountain Military School joined the Jasper and Catawba Light Infantries in camping at the celebration grounds the day before, drilling and giving other demonstrations of military life as people gathered from all around for the next day's celebrations. The reporter tells us that from far and near they came, on horse, in carriages, in wagons, in buggies, old and young, black and white, men and women, until by 9 o'clock the field was thronged with a stirring, bustling, jostling mass of 3,000 people. He then describes the morning program itself, naming each speaker, giving each of the toasts verbatim, noting that while the keynote speaker seemed to be quite able, he did not speak loudly enough for such a large audience. This was followed by a large picnic with more toasting. Then the military units participated in a parade, and there was music from the Mulatto Band of Columbia. The crowd then dispersed, but the militias remained in camp until the morning of the 5th, when they broke camp and marched the 9.5 miles back to Yorkville. It's interesting to note that this celebration includes most of the elements we would expect to see today, except for fireworks. You'll notice that there was a lot of toasting going on at these celebrations. At the Clay Hill event, they toasted George Washington, the Army and the Navy, the individual militia units participating in the demonstrations that day, several local and state politicians, and the ladies in general, among others. And what did they usually toast with in the 19th century? Surprisingly enough, eggnog. My fellow interpreter, Oriana, is going to show us how it was traditionally made.
Hi, I'm Oriana from Historic Bratonsville, and today we'll be making eggnog, and the recipe that we'll be using comes from The Kentucky Housewife, which was published in 1839. Alright, so the items I'll be using today, we have whole milk, powdered sugar, eggs, and nutmeg. So first, to start off, she says to crack the eggs and separate the egg whites from the egg yolks. So we're going to mix the egg whites until they're a frothy texture. And now I'm stirring the yolks. now, so I'll pour the yolks into this large mixing bowl. We're going to also add in the milk. Now I'll go ahead and stir that before I add in the powdered sugar. Okay. Now we're going to add in the powdered sugar and mix that in. Alright, so in the recipe she says to add in the froth next. However, since we are not using rum in the recipe like it calls for, we're going to actually take this and the froth, mix it together, and then cook it over the fire just for about 20 or so minutes. So once we have our eggnog off of the fire, it will be at a temperature where it's safe to drink. Traditionally, they would have added rum or some kind of alcoholic beverage to kind of cook the eggs, but since we did not have alcohol in our recipe, we heated it up over the fire just to make sure it's safe to drink. All right, and then the last step that we have is just to add a little nutmeg over the top. Cheers.
The Civil War brought a temporary halt to 4th of July observations in the South, including in York County. Patriotic celebrations were slow to resume after the war, and at first were mainly organized by the newly freed African Americans of the community. The July 15, 1875 edition of the Yorkville Inquirer includes an account of celebrations in Chesterville, led by 2 fire companies, both black, who paraded through town and demonstrated their fire equipment for the citizens. There were 2 speakers, one white, who mentioned in the course of his speech his belief that the black community didn't really assist in winning the revolution. He was followed by a leader of the black community who was careful to set the record straight, urging his fellow freedmen to stick together. As the years went by, the South slowly returned to the observation of Independence Day. As they rejoined the United States they had helped create, perhaps they remembered that the road to independence came directly through South Carolina, and that was something worth celebrating. Thanks for joining us for Time Travel Tuesday. Have a safe and glorious 4th, and we'll see you next week.